Hey everybody, it's Dave, Blue Jacket 66 here for another video. And I'm fired up about this one because this is right in my wheelhouse of what I do and what I live. And that's food and beverage cards of the 1950s primarily and regional food issues. But we're going to narrow it down. We're going to narrow it down to the decade of the 1950s. And we're going to narrow it down to just hot dog issues. You can call them hot dogs, you can call them wieners, you can call them Franks, you can call them meats, whatever you like, but these are incredibly rare and fascinating cards that were found in or on the packages of hot dogs in the 1950s. Now, the 1950s was an explosion for advertising, an explosion in families, and an explosion for baseball issues. Topps and Bowman were going at it in the 1950s, and I think everybody realized that there was something to be learned about the interest in baseball and baseball issues. And there was no better period for baseball, in my opinion, than the 1950s. Some of our greatest superstars and legends were in their prime and roaring up during the 1950s. Certainly, I love the pre-war issues of cards, but boy, these 1950s food and beverage cards, and today we're going to look at hot dog cards, just really stir me up. They excite me. In comparison, the regular Bowman issues, top issues, are just terribly boring to me. But the way these are packaged and distributed and the rarity and the stories behind them are what I love. And this is going to be, it may seem a little bit disjointed because each section I have to just edit and cut it off and just start a new one. Otherwise, to completely edit this video with pictures would be very difficult for me. I'm going to show some of my cards in my collection on this, but for the most part, I'm going to show pictures of cards in my cards because holding up cards just is not going to do it justice, and I kind of want some room here to show some things here. So we are going to be talking about several hot dog issues here. I don't know if I want to just list them right off or not. Yeah, I think I will. We're going to talk about in chronological order, and some of them overlap, the 1953 Glendale hot dog set. We're going to be talking about the 1953, 54, 55 Hunter's Wieners. Fantastic set. The 1953 through 55 Stahl-Meyer Franks. The king, I think, of hot dog issues. We're going to be talking about the 1954 Wilson Franks, which is one of the only national issues, probably with Swift Meats, but one of the national issues. The rest of these are pretty regional. The 1954-55 SK hot dogs off the East Coast, all those wonderful Orioles issues. The phenomenally rare 1955 Felons Franks, those ultra rare Philadelphia Phillies cards. We're going to be talking about the 1955-56 rodeo meats out of my town of Kansas City. My dad collected these. It's probably one of the things that got us interested in regional issues and food and beverage issues for those rodeo cards, which in collections of the 70s, these regional hot dogs issues were the thing to have. 50, well, we'll talk about 56 through 59 Kahn's Wieners. Of course, Kahn Wieners went all the way up through 1969. We'll talk about the 1957 Swift Meats, which is my least favorite of these issues. And we'll wrap it up with the beautiful 1959 Morel meets Los Angeles Dodgers card. So why do I get to talk about this? Because I know what I'm talking about on this one. I put myself probably in the top 5% of knowledge on these. I've been collecting these and working with these since the 1970s. Most of these cards and all but one of these issues, I've owned multiple cards of these and collected and done partial sets and whatnot, save one. And so a lot of people like coming on YouTube and talking about things, and that's fine, but they talk about things that they have no idea and they read about it a little bit. But I know a little bit about what I'm talking about here. I will always defer to the true experts, which in the food and beverage field, I always defer to Brian Powell, the author of Never Cheaper by the Dozen book, which can be found on Kindle as well as a CD-ROM. If he allows me to, at some point in this video or at the end of this video, I will put his email address, but I'm not going to do that until he gives me permission. And sometimes it takes him a while to get back with me. So let's take a look at these fantastic hot dog issues, vintage baseball cards, incredible rarities of the 1950s. Okay. First, the incredibly difficult 1953 Glendale hot dogs, a Detroit, Michigan issue, 1 year walk-off, 28 card set, all unnumbered, and just the Detroit Tigers. These cards were found in with the hot dogs, so as you can imagine, the condition is horrendous. They're all found with stains, creases, and generally in low grade. They can be found. They're quite expensive, albeit to me, I don't find them to be overly popular. They are fantastic for the food and beverage collector, or a Detroit fan, or someone trying to get a type card. I own a couple of these. To be honest with you, I can't remember who I own. They're generally common players. The 53 Detroit Tigers was not stocked full of superstars, and there's no Hall of Famers. But essentially, you get a picture of the player, an action picture a lot of times, with a facsimile autograph. And on the back, there's a bio, as well as a offer. Now, a lot of these cards and food and beverage cards, but we're just talking about hot dog cards now this time, do have offers on them. And the offer is to mail in the cards for a chance for a trip for two to the World Series, or one of another 150 prizes. These cards are really unheard of. These are cards that in the 70s, if you saw one of these, you'd never seen them before. The internet has changed things. They're still incredibly scarce, and they're very expensive. I don't have a great deal of interest in this set, but I do have a couple of the cards as a collector. But it'd be great to have a type card, and I kind of recommend that. There was a promotional book known. I think that there's maybe 2 of these known, and this promotional book shows pictures of the players that are going to be in the set and that were released with the hot dogs. I've seen a couple of these promotional books before. Highly scarce issue. The 1953 Glendale hot dogs. Fascinating, but no superstars, but incredibly scarce issue that were found in with the hot dogs. And that's what I'm going to discriminate on each of these issues. I have some people that have challenged me before, friendly challenges about whether cards were in with the hot dogs and out, and they insist that they're in. And within this video, I will show definitive proof of each of the issues, that whether they were in or out of the hot dogs. So that's it. Glendale meets. Okay, continuing on. Next up, the 1953 through 55 Hunter's Wieners out of St. Louis, a regional issue, very scarce and generally found in poor condition. There's just St. Louis Cardinals players from each year. In 53, there were 26 players. In 54, there was 30 players, and 30 players in their 1955 offering. Interestingly, the same stretch of years that Stahl-Meyer had their fantastic Stahl-Meyer cards that were both inserted inside the package of wieners or hot dogs and also distributed at stadiums. These cards, however, were just on the outside packaging, so there's really no back to the card, and they were all hand cut. The 1953 had a 2-card panel on it with just the fronts of the cards, the player, the name and facsimile autograph, and that was really about it. There wasn't any back to it, and they were really poorly cut. And these are typically found not soiled so much with hot dog, but just dirt, scuffing, generalized wear, poor care, and there really wasn't many of them made. The 1954 was a 2-panel offering as well that had the front of a card with the player, and then since there's no back to these, the other side of the panel was a created back that had the player's statistics on it for that year or past years. The 1955 was way different. That was a single kind of narrow tapering card that was the loan card on the packaging. And you can see the big card. I have none of these, and I don't think I've ever owned one. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for a Mutual. I think I had a chance at one 10 years ago, and for some reason I passed on it. Perhaps I bought something else, and that's kind of passed me by. You do not see them very often at all, and they're quite expensive. They can be found on eBay. Go ahead and look them up. A lot of really crappy condition cards, but they're very interesting issues. So you're going to want to look for the Stan Musial. You're going to want to look for the Ina Slaughter and the red Shandies. Those are kind of the big cards with it. So Hunter's Wieners. I think Hunter's is probably still around, or at least it was until recently. But unlike the Glendale, which had cards in the packaging with the soiled wieners, these are on the outside of the packaging. And we'll see that type of distribution and that sort of panel cutting here in some more cards. Do I have to say more? Do I have to say more? The greatest hot dog issue, if not the greatest food and beverage issue ever, the 1953, 1954, 1955 Stahl-Meyer Franks cards. These were issued in Stahl-Meyer hot dogs as stiffeners in between the 2 layers of hot dogs. Obviously, that makes for a big mess in poor condition cards. So these are generally found with manufacturer stamps on them, grease, marks, gunk, and it's freaking fabulous. I made a video on this issue a long time ago where I went into a little bit more detail, but I remember the first time I saw this issue, and it was a mantle, and it was, I think it was in poor condition with a mark, which they generally tend to be. And I saw the price and I thought, that is the most beautiful card I've ever seen, and I will never own one. I'm lucky enough to own several of these years, including all the mantles, 53, 54, and 55 Mickey mantles. I made a video of it. It is one of the highlights, if not the highlight of my entire collection, is having all 3 of those. So Stahl-Meyer Franks is a company that goes back, I believe, into the late 1800s and distributed in the New York City area. In 1953, there were only 9 cards, and they were Yankees and Dodgers. And those players were Mickey Mantle, Duke Snider, Roy Campanella, Phil Rizzuto, Hank Bauer, Monty Irvin, Lockman, and Thompson is who they were. And these were on kind of cream-colored backs. They were large cards, and all 3 years are large cards. They're 3 1/4 by 4.5 inches in size. They have rounded corners because they're in the hot dogs, in the meat, in the grease, and to not puncture the container. Unlike the Glendale meats, they did not have rounded corners. So the 53 is likely the rarest of them in that there was a back contest for kids that if you turned in 2 cards plus an essay, you had a chance at winning World Series tickets. So not only are the cards incredibly scarce for a few reasons. One, it was regional, just in New York City. I know New York City is a big place. But two, these were probably, for the most part, trashed by the meats and by the hot dog juice. The other, it was a long time ago and not many survived. And, 3, because of this giveaway, people turned in cards, much like some of the early 1920s candy issues that we've seen with these ice cream cards that people turn them in for a glove or a bat or something like that. So in 1954, they switched it to a gold background, as they did in 1955. But the 1953, that is my Mickey Mantle card that I showed there. I don't want to show my 54 and 55 Mantle. We'll just show other people's cards. So in 1954, it turned into a gold background with a little different back. And instead of this World Series card giveaway, if you in an essay, they had some sort of Stahl-Meyer baseball kit that I have no idea what that was. And also some Giants players were added to a total of 12 players. So the new additions were Willie Mays, and this is the only year he's in the Stahl-Meyer set. Carl Erskine, McDougal, Mueller, and Carl Erskine as well. And I think we lost Campanella and Thompson. Same size card, gold background, little different back. I like the 53 the best, but these gold backgrounds, when you see them, there's no other card like them. They're absolutely fabulous. And the one I'm showing now is the Willie Mays. And I took the liberty of stealing and using the image of Vintage Oddball Cards, who won that recently. Thanks for letting me use that. 1955, again, 12 players. There's a little bit of switch. Willie Mays out and Dusty Rhodes in. Why? I don't know. Mays was just in that 1 year. The ad back this time was for, I think you could win a pennant or get a pennant or a cap. I think if you send in 50 cents plus 2 Stahl-Meyer wrappers, you'd get the cap, and for 25 cents in the 2 wrappers, you would get the pennant. So, again, these were stiffeners. You can't just have, how many hot dogs are in it? 6, 12, 10, I don't know. But in between, they would use these in between to just kind of stiffen the pack. And obviously they were wax coated. The same way that like Dandy potato chips cards were wax coated. So these were wax coated that gave a degree of protection, but really not much. So that was their distribution. I imagine they really got soggy. I don't think refrigeration in the grocery in the early 50s was not like we have now, where you have these highly efficient and cold refrigerators. Things are often set out of ice, or the refrigeration units were left open, and there was probably not kept as cold as we would like. There's probably a lot of slimage, both at the store and when you got it home. Some of these can be found in extraordinarily high condition, and usually that means that some did not make it into circulation. The highest Mantle grade I've ever seen is a 7. But some of the other players can be found in pretty high condition too. But generally, when you get this card, The grade doesn't matter. You kind of want some eye appeal, or you just want the card. And PSA or SGC 1 or 2 are just fantastic. You want a little grease on it? Mine have gook. Love it. I mean, that is the card. It wouldn't feel right. Just like the Black Swamp Vine, the E98 cards. Those look like they were just printed yesterday. Doesn't feel right. And to have one of these cards looking in pristine condition wouldn't feel really right either. Not that I would turn one down, because I would love to have one in that kind of condition, but it makes me put a big smile on my face to see them in any grade. And I really think you should look into these, because beyond the mantle and the maze, look at some of the other players I listed. The Campanella card is just phenomenal. And these are just beautiful issues, and I think you should really consider of all the hot dog issues that I'm going to go over, consider a Stahl-Meyer Franks card be part of your collection. They're out there. They're at the major shows. Be patient. The auction houses, they're out there. Find yourself one. Don't worry about, hey, this is big boy cards, okay? These are vintage sports cards. The grade doesn't matter. These are regional food issues that are so rare. Don't think about the grade. Just make sure that it looks nice to you and grab yourself one. So onward we go. The next hot dog set we're going to talk about is the 1954 Wilson Franks. I think that's probably one of the more recognizable hot dog issues from the 1950s. Even for the average collector, I think you'd recognize the Ted Williams and some of the other cards in the issue. Despite that, they are relatively uncommon cards. If you go to population reports, if you can believe those, in relation to a lot of other issues, there's a relative scarcity there, especially in high grade. These cards were packaged reportedly one card per pack of Wilson Franks hot dogs. That was primarily, I think, a Midwest distribution, but I think it's kind of considered relatively nationwide. At least the player selection with it is pretty diverse, and I'm not sure if I would consider it a regional issue or not. It's certainly not like some of these other we've talked about, where we just have a very small or even single team that's being represented. With these, multiple teams are being represented. If it's a 20 card set, beautiful set. I don't have any idea why it was just produced in 1 year. There's 20 different players. There's 20 cards in a sheet, and these sheets were cut, and the cards were reportedly put in hot dogs. The way I say reportedly is, in general, if you read about these cards, they talk about them being stained and in poor condition, and they are generally in poor condition, but they don't, to me, staining is not a huge problem with this. It's just general condition problems. I mean, I don't know how Wilson Franks packaged them, but they are not a problem with yucky, slimy hot dog juicy stains all over these. It's just not really what you see. Look them up. Just start looking up cards, and you may see rounded corners and poor condition and wrinkles and whatnot, but you really don't see staining. So, but that is evidently how they were distributed. But in honesty, a lot of them, there's a lot of uncut sheets. Not a lot. There's uncut sheets that have been found. There's hordes of cards that were not distributed. I think the last card was like a 54 card horde in 2018. I don't think there were any Ted Williams in that, but hordes are found. Small hordes are found from time to time of cards that were not circulated. The key card is without doubt the Ted Williams. It's a nice swinging pose. I wish it wasn't on that white background that it's on, but it is. Also, we'll show some cards. Bob Feller, Gil Hodges, Campanella. These are just fantastic cards, and everybody really loves the hot dog logo that's floating around somewhere on the card. Sometimes above the player's head, a nice package of hot dogs. I have some of these cards. I have the Williams. I have the Campanella. I think a couple others. It's a very difficult set to put together. Maybe not so difficult with time in low grade, but if you're going to get intermediate grades on these, you're going to have some great difficulty. I know Nellie Fox in even mid-grade is very, very difficult to find. So here's the sheet of them. There's 20 cards, so it's 4x5 cards of the sheet. And you can just see the very, very thin borders on them. So a lot of times they have quote unquote centering issues. I don't even care on this issue because the borders are so small. It doesn't even, I can't even tell, especially on the Williams. You'll see off center on the Williams, and it's white on white. It's impossible for me to say how bad the centering is or even to see it. So the backs are interesting. It's not like the typical food issues that we have been seeing and will see. The backs of these cards really just look like a Bowman or Topps issue. There's a bio and stats, and at the very bottom, is that it's Wilson Franks company, but that's really about it. There's no big major advertising on the card except for the package of wieners on the front of the car. So front of the card. So probably the most recognizable 50s hot dog issue, and probably the most collected. I would imagine if any of you have any of these cards in your collection, it would probably be a Wilson Franks, and I don't blame you because they're beautiful cards. I think the eye appeal of these cards compared to all the other cards that in the sets that we're discussing with this video, it ranks up there very high. They're gorgeous cards. A 1954 Wilson Franks.